am the acquisitions editor for Wolfpack Publishing, and I am here today with my friend Michael A. Black. Mike Black, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay.
Michael is an author of over 38 books now. Is that correct?
I kind of lost count about that, yeah.
Okay, hundreds of short stories. You've been doing this for quite a while, but like me, you had a career in law enforcement. Were you writing at the same time, or was that come later?
Probably about midway through my career, I went back to grad school to get my master's, and I published a couple of short stories, and then I started writing novels.
Okay, and yeah, you worked in the Chicago area?
Right, south suburbs of Chicago.
Okay, and so that was Chicago PD, is that correct?
No, it wasn't in Chicago PD per se. It was a suburb of Chicago.
Okay, and you were there for 20 plus years, worked SWAT and many other things?
I did. It was just shy of 33 years, 32 years, 11 months.
Wow, okay. I got you a little bit beat. I did 35, but what can I say? You know, anything over 30 and you're still alive, it's a good thing, right?
Right.
And I think when I finally decided to retire, I said to my wife, I think it's time to retire because I'm beginning to like the suspects more than the victims. What I meant by that really was I worked obviously in sexual assault investigations, and you know the suspects are going to lie to you. It's in the contract, right? They know they're going to lie. We know they're going to lie. It's it's the way it is. But I spent a great majority of my day getting the victims to tell me the truth. And I found that very frustrating toward the end of my career. Just tell me the truth. I'm not going to judge you. I just want to help you out here. And so it was time to go.
Yeah.
Now, you said you wrote a couple of short stories first. When did you first decide that you want to be a writer? I mean, being a cop and being a writer, I should know there are kind of different parts of your brain that you use. So what made you want to take up the typewriter?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first short story in the 6th grade, and I kept badgering the teacher to let me write a short story because we had to write these dumb themes about summer vacation or whatever. So finally she agreed to do it. She called me up on a Friday and said, okay, you write a short story, you can read it in front of the class on Monday. So walking home that night with my buddy, I said, I got to write a short story. He goes, what are you going to write about? And then it hit me. I didn't know. So I worked all weekend on the story, and then I went into class on Monday and I read it and in front of the class, and people started snickering and laughing. And she called me up to her desk and grabbed the paper away from me and wrote, D, poor work. And then she's handed it back and said, don't ever try this again. So that kind of inspired me to keep going. But if I look back on it, it kind of foreshadowed everything that was to come in my writing career. I got my first assignment, my first deadline, and my first rejection all in the space of 3 days.
Wow. No kidding. That was and all for the same book?
Yeah.
So determination to keep writing. Were you a big reader?
I've always been a big reader. I started reading quite young. I read all the adventure classics, and then I gravitated to Hammett and Chandler. And
so
Paul
that's
Bishop too.
Oh, Paul Bishop too. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Every reader's a gem. With your writing, what was the first book that you actually put out under your own name?
Well, actually, the first book, I wrote 2 books to encourage literacy in high school readers. That was one, M1A1 Abrams tank, and then I wrote another one, volunteering to help kids. And those were 2 nonfiction books. My first novel was Killing Frost, and I think it came out in 2002.
And was that the start of a series for you?
It was a series I had in mind with a private detective named Ron Shade. I had written a couple of short stories with the character, and they were published, and then I got the idea to do a novel.
And how many books were in that series eventually?
Let's see, I had 4 books in that series, and then I started a police procedural series. I had 3 in that, with some different characters. Then I wrote, I got an opportunity to work with Richard Belzer from TV's Law and Order Special Victims.
How did that come about?
It came about through a guy that, at the time, Martin Greenberg was working with me, and he sort of acted as my agent. He was looking for someone to ghostwrite the novel with Belzer, and and we worked together on it. And so that came about. So I did 2 novels with him, and then I continued on to that. So.
Now the novels with Belzer. Now Martin Greenberg was a big anthologist. He used to put together a lot of collections of short stories, and I know because like you, I participated in a number of those. But putting you together with Belzer and saying, I wanted somebody to ghostwrite the novel, how much input did he have into this? Did you work with him closely, or did you just, like in many cases, just wing it?
Well, I flew out to New York and met Richard, and I found him to be a very nice guy. We both have a love of animals, and he brought his dogs to the restaurant. We met in the Algonquin Hotel, and we talked, and we talked on the phone a few times. And so he had naturally, he and his agent had full control over the manuscript, what they wanted in and what they didn't want. And so it turned out to be, it was a pretty easy to work with, very unique and rewarding experience.
Now, wasn't he the character in the book as well?
It was. The idea was the conceit of the novels was that he was the character in the novel. He was himself in the novel. So I just fictionalized.
I'm not a cop, but I play one on TV.
Exactly.
You also have written quite a few books for one of the most iconic men's adventure series there's ever been, and that's The Executioner with Mac Bolan. How did your first assignment come around for Mac Bolan, The Executioner?
I was very lucky. I was introduced to an editor through a mutual acquaintance, mutual friend, and I expressed interest in doing it. They asked me if I was interested in doing the series, and I said I was. So they requested that I do a sample chapter and come up with a plot idea, and so I did. And they liked it, so they okayed the project. And after that, I kept going.
And how many executioners have you now written? Because it's quite a few, right?
I think it's about 11 or 12.
And are you still writing those? I know that they were winding the series up at one point, but weren't you still getting assignments?
I think my last one came out about a year ago now. It'll be a year in December. And they originally were published by Harlequin, which was up in Canada, and then Harlequin got bought out by HarperCollins, and so then HarperCollins has really been continuing the series. They were releasing them as mass market paperbacks, and then they decided to go with ebooks, and now everything's kind of on hold. With the current situation in New York, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
With Bolan, did you find those difficult to write, or were they formulaic? What did you feel about the process of writing in a work for hire situation?
It was pretty easy. I wrote. The only problem with The Executioner is there's been so many books in the series, like 400 books or so in the series, and it basically, you want to avoid being repetitious of what's been done before, but that's kind of difficult with that many books out. So what I would do is the editor would request, she said, "Are you up for another executioner?" And I would say, "Yeah." She said, "Well, give me some ideas." And I'd send her a bunch of ideas as far as plots that they wanted, and they would choose one, and then I would write from there.
Okay. Now, you're also part, and have been for quite a while, of the Public Safety Writers of America, which started out as Police Writers of America originally.
Right.
You've been with them about 11 years. Tell me about the organization.
It's an organization that is made up of people who like writing and like reading. We have a conference every year in Las Vegas, and a lot of our members are ex military, retired police, firefighters, but others are merely mystery writers that enjoy writing mysteries and want to learn more about the police work and the field.
Okay, so the focus of the membership has really quite changed over the years, from strictly from police writers to be very inclusive of a lot of other public safety professions and the military, and as you say, just plain folks who are interested in learning more about police work
Exactly.
for their writing. And I think that's one of the ways that you and I came into contact with each other, and eventually led to me asking you to write for Wolfpack with a couple of our series, in Gunslinger in particular.
Right.
And Gunslinger was a very interesting series, and I kind of gave it to you as a challenge. And I think I said, what we're trying to do here is a Gothic Western. And you did Killer's Brand and Killer's Ghost. Is that correct? I'm remembering rightly?
Killer's Choice, Killer's Brand.
Choice. Okay. And how was it? Were those the first Westerns that you'd written?
Actually, I'd written a Western short story a long time ago. So it was actually technically my first Western. And then I'd written a book about Bass Reeves, who was a deputy marshal in the late 1800s.
Was that book about Bass Reeves before you did the Gunslinger books?
It was.
Or was that after?
It was before.
Okay. It just took a long time to come out, because I know that's just come out either earlier this year or the end of last year.
Right.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But how different was it writing Westerns from writing high-tech Mac Boland adventures?
Oh, well, anytime you put something in a past eras, you have to kind of watch it. It changes a lot of things. I mean, even your metaphors or your similes have to be adjusted to fit the time period. And I had to research a lot about weapons of the time, the handguns and the rifles that they used in that time period. I went out to I also write for a gun magazine, and I went out to the SHOT Show a few years ago, and they had a replica of the Gatling gun out there. You could actually fire it.
Wow.
And so I want to put the Gatling gun in. I put it in the Bass Reeves book, but I want to put it in one of the Gunslinger books if I get the opportunity.
And when you are picking up a series that other writers have written those characters, is that difficult to keep the tone of the books the same? Did you read some of the earlier Gunslinger books before you stepped into that role?
I did try to research as much as I can. That was a template that you put out, Wolfpack put out, that was beneficial, and I listened, and I also communicated with some of the other authors as far as what they were doing, what their intentions were, so the idea was to make the books sequential. And I was writing the third book. I didn't have an opportunity to read the first book because at the time I was writing it, because it wasn't yet completed.
Fast schedule makes the demands of doing this difficult. But I think Mel Odom wrote the first book, and I think you talked to Mel quite a bit to make sure that your plot was in line with where we had the whole layout of the series to go. And it seemed to be an interesting and sometimes difficult ways to work, but it seemed to eventually came to fruition and worked really, really well. I think that.
I was really happy with it.
Tell me about the Bass Reeves book. Now, was Bass Reeves just a personal favorite character of yours? A real person, obviously. What made you want to sit down and write Legends of the West?
I was just fascinated. I read about Bass Reeves, and I was just fascinated with his life and just his dedication to duty. And the man came from slavery in the 1860s, and then became a deputy marshal, and was a deputy marshal for quite a few years. And he just had a tremendous sense of duty. He was illiterate, but he was also very intelligent. And he was limited by his background, but he was just a really outstanding individual. I was just fascinated by his life, and I really wanted to portray him in what I would hope would be an interesting and fair way.
When you say that he was illiterate, didn't he memorize the descriptions of the wanted outlaws when somebody would read to him from the wanted poster?
Right. He was purported to have a virtual photographic memory, and he would look at if they had pictures available or descriptions. He would be able to internalize these, and as I said, he couldn't write anything down, but he could remember just about everything. So
wow, what an incredible character he was. I mean, he took down so many outlaws, big time.
He did, and he at one time he even tracked down his own son, who was wanted for murdering his wife. So.
And brought him in, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. Now, with Wolfpack, you've written for Gunslinger, you've done some other projects with us, but very soon here you have your own series starting with Wolfpack with Trackdown. Tell us about Trackdown. Tell us about that series, its concept, where it came from, and what you hope it to be.
Well, Trackdown is about modern day bounty hunters, and the character I have is Stephen Wolf. He's half Indian, and he's an ex-Army Ranger. He was falsely accused and convicted of war crimes in Iraq, and he served time in Leavenworth, and now he's coming out, and his mentor and friend hires him takes him under his wing and sort of begins him in a career of bounty hunting, where they track down people who jump bail, and so bail bondsman posts a bond for them, and they don't show up for court, and the bail bondsman is responsible, so they hire bail enforcement agents to track the people down and bring them in before they have to forfeit the money.
And you have them going after big time bail jumpers, though. And
Right.
you also have the sub plot running through this of your main character trying to clear his name for what he was falsely accused of.
Right. That's part of the series too. He wants to clear his name because he has the stigma of being an ex-con, and he's lost all his benefits. He was dishonorably discharged from the military, and he wants to try to clear his name. So I also have a corresponding plot that he's trying to do that.
Now, currently, there's 3 books in that series. I know they're about to debut next month, I believe. Where do you hope to go with this series? Do you want to start another series? Do you like starting series fresh, or do you like continuing them on?
Well, continuing on, it's always interesting. I'm actually working on the 4th in the series now. I turned the first 3 in, and then the 4th one is due in December, and I'm working on that now. And I'm going to hopefully end it at that point where the series can continue or not, depending on.
Move on to another idea, maybe.
Right.
Right. But I think this is going to be a big seller for Wolfpack, and I think you're going to find yourself writing books 5 and 6 somewhere down the line here, because I think people are really going to like these characters. There really is a lot of action, but there's also a lot of depth to the books. They're not. I read a lot of Mac Bolan books, but when you're done, there's not a lot of there. It's a very enjoyable ride. But with Trackdown, I've read all 3 of them, and I just really feel that I know these characters, and that there's a real involvement that I have with them, and invested in them now. And so I certainly would like to see you continue the series past book 4. Growing up, tell me the one book that you read that you think influenced you the most. Fiction book.
Wow. I was very influenced by Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. As far as books I've read, I keep going. I really was fully grown when I read it. It's Deliverance by James Dickey, the novel. I think that's probably the book that I would go back to saying it's been most influential on me. I was an adult when I read it, but I still go back to that book as being something that I really aspire to try to emulate.
And what was it about it that drew you to it? Was it the theme? Was it the style of writing? What was it that moved you in Deliverance?
I think it was Dickey's writing style. He was a nationally recognized poet in the 1960s, and then he spent 10 years writing what was basically a thriller novel. It was made into a fabulous movie with Burt Reynolds and John Voight. Ned Beatty and Ronnie Cox, and the movie was good, but the book was just his poetic vision of how describing just the wilderness in Georgia along the river. It just really drew me. I was thinking this man can really write.
Okay. Is there one book that you have in your mind that, given the perfect opportunity, you would like to write?
Well, I got quite a few books that I'd like to write. There's one that's sort of a modern day Western. It's set in at the turn of the 20th century. I'm sorry, the early 1900s, I think 1910. It incorporates writer Ambrose Bierce and the Mexican Revolution and the early days of Hollywood. I was working on that one, and then I kind of put that on the back burner to do the Gunslinger series.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being with us today. I'm really looking forward to a Trackdown series coming out from Wolfpack. I think you're going to do really well with that series, and look forward to talking with you again. Thanks
Okay,
for being
Paul,
with
thank
me.
you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
You too.